Thank you very much, and good morning to you and your team and the wonderful work you're doing here.
As always, I will not say much. Over to you.
Right. So, good morning to our listeners in and around Winneba and our viewers all over the country and the world. This is Radio Windy Bay 98.3 FM, and the program is Radio Lecture, coming to you from the Department of Educational Foundations. And the course today is EDC 242, Trends in Education and School Management in Ghana, and it's for all level 300 students of the University of Education, Winneba. Today, our topic for discussion happens to be the meaning and types of communication. The meaning and types of communication. So our task here is that by the end of this lecture or presentation, we should be able to demonstrate an understanding or identify the types of communications that we have, and before that, demonstrate an understanding of the meaning of what communication. What is communication? The concept, what goes into it. So, meaning and types of communication. So, our listeners and students will agree with me that effective communication provides a solid ground for successful organizations, and for that matter, educational system and school leadership. It enhances clarity, builds trust, and ensure alignment among administrators, teachers, students, and parents. This, in schools, strong communication enhances collaboration, streamlines decision making, and creates a positive learning environment. When we talk of leaders, communication is a vital tool for inspiring followers or staff. Communication is a vital tool for resolving conflict, and communication is a vital tool for engaging the community. So when communication breaks down, misunderstandings arise, morale of followers and members in organizations suffers, and institutional goals becomes quite difficult to achieve. This sets the pace and emphasizes the importance of communication. And as I've said, various families, communities, societies, nations have been plugged into different misunderstandings and conflict because there have been either been a miscommunication or misinformation, which tells us that communication is very key. So in the diverse era of learning needs and digital transformation, intentional and adaptive communication strategies are not just beneficial, but they are essential for driving student success and organizational excellence. Now let's delve into the meaning of communication then. So we'll take a couple of definitions and then delve into them. First, it is regarded as a purposeful activity, and purposeful underlined, purposeful activity of exchanging information and meaning. Purposeful activity of exchanging information and meaning across space and time, using various means, whichever is available, or preferred. Communication is a purposeful activity of exchanging information and meaning across space and time using various means, which might include technical or natural means, whichever is available or preferred. So that is one definition of communication.
Windy Bay 98.3.
Another one says that communication occurs when signals carrying information bearing messages. Signals carrying information bearing messages between a source, that is a sender, and a destination, that is a receiver. Communication occurs when signals carrying information bearing messages between a source or a sender and a destination or receiver. So these two definitions emphasize key aspects of communication. The first one talks about purposeful activity, exchange of information that occurs between space and time, and using various means. The other one also talks about signals carrying information bearing messages. Information bearing messages between a source, that is a sender, and a destination or a receiver. Now this brings to the fore some key elements when we are dealing with communication. So basically we are looking at a sender. We are talking about a message, and then there's a medium through which the message is conveyed, and then there's a target person or recipient or recipients. There is a sender, there is a message, there is a medium, and then there is a recipient. So as a reflection, let's think about these questions. In a school organization, who are the possible senders of messages? And what are the possible messages? What are the possible mediums that these messages are carried through? And who are the possible recipients? As we delve into the meaning of communication, I will urge our students to be reflecting on these questions. That will guide us to understand and contextualize communication properly as we are dealing with education and schools. Yes, so that tells us that communication is a two-way process. It's a two-way process of reaching mutual understanding. Two-way process of reaching mutual understanding. Let's remember that we have a sender and then we have a receiver. And in between, we have message and we have medium. And that makes it a two-way process where sender and receiver comes to a mutual agreement. So the communication process is complete once the receiver understands the sender's message. It becomes complete once the receiver understands the sender's message. Now, the recipient of the message must be able to identify the sender's intent and take into account the message's content. So, what is the intention of the sender? What is the content of the message? And understanding this or identifying this, the recipient now resolve any misunderstanding that comes with the message. And so he or she tries to accurately decode the information and decide on how to act on it. So it is very paramount for receivers to first clarify a lot of issues when messages are sent and there seem to be some misunderstanding. What is the intent of the sender? What is the content of the message? Is there any misunderstanding? Is there a need for clarity? And all this can be done when the receiver has been able to accurately decode the information and decide on how to act on it. So I think that during our face-to-face, we will delve into the communication process where certain terminologies like encoding and decoding will be delved into further. But here we are looking at the concept. Right. So if you just joined us, this is Radio Windy Bay 98.3 FM. Coming to you live from the University of Education, Winneba. And the program this morning is radio lecture from the School of Education and Lifelong Learning under the Department of Educational Foundations. The course is EDC 242, Trends in Education and School Management in Ghana. And our topic for discussion this morning is the meaning and types of communication. If you just joined us, we just went through the meaning and the concept or the meaning of communication. We have already identified that communication occurs when there is an exchange of information, exchange of information bearing messages between a source, that is a sender, and a destination. It is a purposeful activity of exchanging information and meaning across space and time, using various technical and natural means, whichever is available or preferred. Now, talking about purposeful activity, that should inform us that you don't just wake up and communicate. It must be thought through and planned. Go through a process, a thought through process, and then you plan. That is why you don't just wake up and be making certain comments, because communication is a deliberate activity. Right. We have identified certain key issues when it comes to communication. These include a sender. There must be a sender. And then there is a message. And how are you getting this message to the sender? And that means that there are mediums of communication, or there's a medium of communication. And then we have a target group or individual, which is a recipient. So in schools, we have senders of information, of communication. We have messages that are sent. We have possible medium, and we have possible recipient. It is a two-way process of reaching mutual understanding, and the communication process is complete once the receiver understands the sender's message. And that is where we say that the recipient or the receiver must be able to identify the intent of the sender, take into account the message's content. If there is any misunderstanding, should be able to resolve them. And all these things are done when you are able to break down the information and decide on how to act on it, basically decoding the information. Right. Let's now move on to the types of communication. Haven't gone through the meaning of communication, let's go through the types of communication. There are a number of types, so many types of communication, but for the purpose of this course, we will limit ourselves to 4 main types. We'll look at interpersonal communication. We will talk about non-verbal communication, and of course, verbal or oral communication, and then written communication. We will talk about interpersonal communication, non-verbal communication, verbal or oral communication, and then written communication. Let me also say that in some aspects, communication can be classified into the following. Note that we talked about the types: interpersonal, non-verbal, verbal, and written. But it can also be classified into formal and informal, as we have oral and written, internal and external, and then we have, of course, verbal and non-verbal. So let's take note of the types and the other classifications, right? So let's first pick interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication. So this is the type of communication between small groups of individuals, typically in a face-to-face setting, where participants engage in a minimally restricted dialogue with each other. It is a type of communication that occurs normally between small groups, and it is typically face-to-face, and participants engage in minimally restricted dialogue with each other. So that is where, let's dwell a bit on the minimally restricted dialogue. In an official environment, school environment, there are issues that are normally engaged in when we come to communication. School, academic issues, discipline, counseling, finance, administration. Yes, these are official, direct issues that people within a school setting engage in when they are communicating. But when it comes to interpersonal communication, you see that these restrictions the restriction of dealing with issues that are considered more official is restricted a bit. It is a bit loose, so people may go further to find about the well-being of their subordinates and each other, have some friendly discussions and the rest. So it becomes more interpersonal. Yes, and that is why most of the time it is more within the organization or the school setting. It is more on a face-to-face setting or basis. So that is more interpersonal, going a bit beyond official discussions, interpersonal communication. Right, and this is very important because when you look at some of the theories of administration and management, the humanists place so much emphasis on interpersonal communication, that yes, we are human, so you go beyond the scientific management theory that is more mechanistic. You try to go through, what you are supposed to do, no social encounters and the rest. But we are social beings, and therefore, as we communicate, we try to engage and go beyond the regimental structures within an organization. Right, so that is interpersonal communication, and very important in any setting that we find ourselves. And it is one of the key types of communication that people engage in and day out. And I always say that in Africa and in Ghana, where we are more communalists in terms of individuals, we do a lot of what? Interpersonal communication within our official settings and the rest. Yes, so just as I said, it is minimally restricted because individuals who engage in interpersonal communication share some level of familiarity with each other. So it goes beyond your schedule for the day, but what have you been doing? What were you up to over the weekend? How was your night? These are all interpersonal communication, and it makes people disclose more likely more information, or provide more intimate details than one would be with a stranger. Right, interpersonal communication. Let's move on to the next one, which is verbal or oral communication. So this is the process of expressing information or ideas by word of mouth. The process of expressing information or ideas by word of mouth is the process of verbally transmitting information and ideas from one individual or group to another. It is the process of verbally transmitting information and ideas from one individual or group to another. So oral communication can be either formal or informal. Let's take note of that. It can be formal or informal. So in this instance, so we have face-to-face conversations within the school, among colleagues, among students, which can be informal or which are informal in nature. Telephone conversations, discussions that take place in the school and the workplace, all these are verbal or oral communication that are informal in nature. Right. Then we have non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication. So non-verbal communication describes the process of conveying meaning in the form of non-word message. So basically, there's no sound, word message, conveying meaning in the form of non-word message. So it deals with communications that include gestures, body language or posture, facial expression, and eye contact. All these are what we refer to as non-verbal communication. And so let's take note that non-verbal communication often complements the verbal message and also sometimes may contradict. So for instance, a nod reinforces a positive message among Africans. It's a gesture.
98.3.
Then a
FM.
wink may contradict a stated positive message. So in as much as it reinforces verbal communication, sometimes gestures can be confusing and contradictory in nature. It also regulates interactions. So non-verbal cues convey messages about when the other person should speak or not to speak. So regulate interaction. So for instance, when you are moderating or you are teaching, sometimes you raise up your hand just to indicate that hold on a bit, it is not your time, or you can now signal with your hand for someone to go ahead and make their point. All right, so it complements our verbal communication as well, and it is very important. But again, in this non-verbal communication, we must be careful when using them, especially in various contexts, because they might have different meanings in various contexts, and we must take note of that. So non-verbal communication, we have body language like nodding the head. That means agreement. So its perceived meaning is agreement. So in any time somebody nods the head, and the person is in agreement with whatever the sender is saying. Shaking the head from side to side, of course, disagreement. And then tapping the foot or drumming finger. Yeah, sometimes we indicate that you need to hurry up or get straight to the point. Then rolling the eyes or lifting the eyebrow, may mean disbelief. Slapping the forehead, forgetfulness. So we can go on and on and on, and I believe our listeners have more to this when it comes to non-verbal communication and some of the body languages and their perceived meanings. Then the last but not the least is the written communication. And written communication refers to messages that are transmitted to receivers in writing. Basically, it's in writing. So it involves any type of message that makes use of the written word. Written communication is the most important and most, of course, effective of any of the mode of organizational communication. I mean, you are able to easily refer to its evidence. It's very clear. Right. So we've been looking at the types of communication, and we established that for the purpose of this presentation, we are looking at interpersonal communication as one type, non-verbal communication, verbal or oral communication, and then we have the written communication. We also made a point that, yes, communication can also be classified as formal and informal. oral and written, internal and external, and then verbal and non-verbal. Yes, finally, under the types, as we talk about the types, we can also look at communication in the form of vertical communication in an organization. So, top down or bottom up. So, students can communicate from their level to management, and that is more of a bottom up or vertical communication. Right. Then feedback from students, parents, teachers to leadership. It is vertical from the bottom to the top. Then we have policies from administration, information from administration, communication from management to staff and students and the community. And that is more of a top-down communication in education. We can also have horizontal, which is peer-to-peer collaboration among teachers and staff. And as we noted in the other classification, we can have external. So parent-teacher meetings, community engagement, and other in communication across various stakeholders of course, outside the education or the school setting will make it an external one. Right. So let's note that in communication, we can have the vertical, that is the top down and bottom up, where communication can occur from leadership sending information about policies to teachers, to students, and the community. And then we can also have feedback or various concerns coming from students, parents, communities to teachers and leadership. Then we can have horizontal, peer-to-peer, so that collaboration among teachers and staff, communication, discussions among teachers, staff, students, that is peer-to-peer. And then finally external. So, dear students and listeners, we have been FM. Having a presentation on the meaning and types of communication. And we've gone through the meaning, and we've also identified some types of communication. Our studio lines are open: 050-392-3158. The same line is for WhatsApp: 050-392-3158. We are streaming live on the university website, www.uew.edu.gh, and we are also live on Facebook, Radio Windy Bay 98.3 FM. Your comments, your questions, your contributions are now, we invite your comment and contribution at this point. Thank you very much. Right, so welcome back to our radio lecture for the course EDC 242 Trends in Education and School Management in Ghana. And this morning our discussion has been on the meaning and types of communication. We have some few messages on Facebook. We have Maldina Cruz is monitoring the best show live and clear inside Indianapolis, Kumasi, Thanos, Kesman Junction is the main location. Right, thank you very much. And then we have Eric Dundee. Good morning, sir. Watching from Buya, Pandai District. This is Eric. All right. And then we have Mohammed Uzaidu, monitoring live at South Campus in Winneba. Right. So our studio lines are still activated. 050-3923-158, 050-392-3158. It is the same line for our WhatsApp messages and SMS. 050-392-3158. We are live on Facebook, Radio Windy Bay 98.3 FM, and also we are streaming live on the university website, www.uw.edu.gh.
Windy Bay.
Our discussion this morning have been on the types, the meaning and types of communication. And it has been emphasized that communication is a purposeful activity that involves the exchange of information and meaning across space and time. And here it also uses or make use of various means, whichever is available or which is preferred. Communication involves a sender, it involves a message, there is a medium, there is a recipient. And there are various possible messages that are carried through in a school setting. There are messages, there are senders. We also have mediums that are used, and then we have possible recipients. It is also noted that communication is a two-way process, and so it is not just about sending information bearing signals, but it is also a point where the receiver understands and is able to carry it through the intention of the sender. So that makes it a two-way process, reaching a mutual understanding. We then delve into the types of communication. So we have interpersonal, for the purpose of this presentation, interpersonal communication, non-verbal communication, verbal or oral communication, and then written communication. It was noted that interpersonal communication is the type where small group of individuals engage in a face-to-face discussion, and here participants engage in a minimally restricted dialogue with each other. So individuals who engage in interpersonal communication share some level of familiarity with each other, making them more likely to disclose information or provide more intimate details than one would do with a stranger. Then we also talk about the verbal or oral communication. And this basically has to do with expressing information or ideas by word of mouth. We also identified nonverbal communication, where information is conveyed through a non-word message. So that include body gestures, body language, or posture, facial expression, eye contact. And then finally, we talked about written communication. And basically, this has to do with messages that are transmitted to receivers in writing. Now, we also further noted that communication can be vertical, that is top, down, or bottom up. So, for example, administration or management sending information to teachers and students and the community. Then we can have the opposite, where students, parents, teachers, and community members also send information to management, and that is more of what the bottom-up approach. It can also be horizontal, and that has to do with collaboration among teachers, communication among teachers and staff. And it can also be what? External, that is parent-teacher meetings, community engagement. Right, so we have a message here that is from Evans Esuma. Is that, please sir, concerning the types of communication, when a head teacher addresses the whole school, can that one be classified as vertical communication or formal communication? Yes, so Evans is both. It's vertical and it's also formal, because it is a formal occasion where the headmaster will summon students at an assembly or a gathering and then convey some information to them. So that is, in the first place, that is formal. And then again, it is vertical, top to down, because it is coming from the headmaster to the student, or the whole student body, or the whole school. Right. Thank you very much.
This is Radio Windy Bay, Windy Bay 98.3 FM. This is Radio Windy Bay, Windy Bay 98.3 FM.
Right. So we are still receiving your messages, your call-ins. We have 050392331. This is our 3158. This is our studio line for WhatsApp and SMS. We are streaming live on Facebook, 98.3 Windy Bay, Radio Windy Bay 98.3 FM, and then streaming live on the university website, www.uu.edu.gh. Right. Yes, so we have some messages on Facebook. Yes. So we have Nathaniel Ago. He said, please, can you once again explain the classification of communication? Say, yes. So as we went through the types, I also noted that it can be classified as formal and informal. All right. So when we take verbal communication, for instance, it can be formal and informal. When we take written, it can be formal and informal. Non-verbal can be formal and informal. Right. Then we have oral and written communication. I mean, that is captured under the types that we generally talked about. And then in all the others too, it can be internal and external. So there are certain information that are communicated within a school setting, within an organizational setting, that are for the consumption of the people within the organization or the school. And then it can be external, so to parents, to community members, to other stakeholders outside the direct management of the direct running of the school. And then we also talk about the fact that it can be verbal and what non-verbal. So that is the classification that I sought to clarify.
Windy Bay.
So,
98.3
dear students,
FM.
we have established that communication plays a very important role in a successful educational system and school leadership. And therefore, it is important that we deliberately plan for any communication that we want to do within the organization that we find ourselves. We must understand that communication involves a sender and then a receiver, and it becomes complete when the receiver now understands the communication. The receiver is able to decode the message and act accordingly. Let's also note that there are different types of communication, which include interpersonal, non-verbal, verbal, and written communication. The communication can also be vertical, it can be horizontal, and external as well. And we must take note of all these as we deal with communication. We know that in the face-to-face, we'll go through the communication process where we'll delve into who is the sender, how does the sender encode the communication, what are the various mediums, who are the receiver, and what is the decoding process and the feedback which forms the communication process. Thank you very much for your audience and hope to meet you another time.
Super. And